Good day, everyone. My name is Belen,
And I'm Arnaldo.
and the topic we are going to present to you is electronic voting. These are the topics we are going to discuss in this presentation. Traditional paper-based voting systems have some weaknesses. For this, the e-voting systems have become an alternative for elections in several countries. However, it raises security concerns. So, is the world ready to use e-voting systems? Electronic voting is a voting process that is done electronically without using paper and the ballot box. During the election process, registered voters use the voting terminals at a voting center to cast their ballots. Now we will see the e-voting system's requirements. Eligibility in this context means that only registered voters should be able to vote. Secrecy means that the link between the vote and the voter should be irreversible. Verifiability refers to the ability of a voter to verify its vote after casting it and after the results are published. Some approaches for vote verification will be mentioned later. Authentication: a vote should correspond to an authenticated voter without losing secrecy. Reliability: the outcome of the voting process corresponds to the votes cast and the integrity of the votes is preserved. Voting machines raise serious security concerns. They make the election process less verifiable. As with e-voting machines, no physical records of a voter's intent exist. One approach could be after a voter has finished making selections. If the voter approves the ballot, he presses a button to confirm his vote and observe the printed ballot drop into a ballot box. If the voter does not approve the ballot, he or she has to be able to vote again. Voters should also be able to know that their vote is accurately included in the tally. We must do this without compromising the voter's anonymity. Two systems that propose to provide this are Vote Here's VHTI and SureVote. In SureVote's scheme, the voting machine prints the receipt in two layers that are encoded using visual cryptography. When laminated together, they reveal the voter's selections, but each layer independently is meaningless dots. The voter selects one of the two layers to retain as a receipt. In Vote Here's scheme, the receipt, instead of containing the voter selection, it prints only code numbers for each selection. The code numbers are based on a codebook that is generated uniquely for the voter's ballot sequence number, which is stored on a keycard given only to the voter. In the first stage, configuration and installation of e-voting systems on terminals are done. This happens prior to an election. The next stage is voter registration. The authorities determine who is eligible to vote. Then, vote validation happens. At this stage, the credentials of the voter are validated for its attempt to vote. Next, the voter makes its selection of candidates on the terminal and review it. Next stage is vote casting. Here, the voter confirms his vote. Once the vote is confirmed, this is sent to the server and is registered in the database. And the last stage is vote tallying. At this stage, the accumulated votes are counted, agreed upon, and published. If the data is transmitted over a network with no encryption or secure protocol, there are some issues that might arise on some of the stages. For configuration of terminals and vote casting stages, a man-in-the-middle attack might occur. An adversary might modify the data to impersonate any other voting terminal. Also, for ballot definition data, an adversary might modify the candidates and parties' information. Also, the attacker can tamper the vote of the voter. Also, an attacker must not be able to link voters with their votes. While the voter's identity is not stored with the votes, each record must not give any extra information about the corresponding voter. For example, if the identifier of the record includes some information such as the voting terminal and election, this could give some hint to an attacker that was, for example, analyzing the sequence of people arriving and voting on some terminal.
We can classify electronic voting systems into two broad categories: those that are being supervised by authorized entities on the election day, and those that permit the voters casting their vote through the open internet. Even though there were many devices throughout the years, on this presentation we're going to analyze and discuss polling place direct recording electronic voting machines, or DRE, and internet voting as well. Over the last few decades, there have been several types of these devices. They all try to automate the election process and increase the speed and accuracy of the votes counting. And to be honest, they do tackle many problems that the paper ballots faced, but they introduce new problems as well. These machines are often referred as black boxes. That is because all the record of the votes, the counting process, the auditing, everything is practically unobservable. They all happen inside this computer software that is usually kept secret from the public. Some computer scientists might even claim whoever programs the computer decides what election results should be reported. Let's take this example of the vault. After a security breach in 2003, the entire source code of one of their electronic voting machines was leaked. Many problems were found, from how they used encryption to protect their votes. The same symmetric encryption key was hard-coded in all of their machines, to the way the ballot was stored on the memory cards. It allowed to determine how did the voters cast their vote. Also, a lot of evidence of poor engineering practices was found in the code that would certainly result in unsecure, unreliable software. Even if no one attacks the voting system, these devices are just computers and they have bugs. There are other problems as well introduced by these electronic machines, such as weak password by election officials. The software also requires regular security updates, and most of the machines don't have paper backup that can be used to audit voting. Now, if we look at internet voting, it's very likely to increase voter convenience and therefore the potential voter turnout. But what are the biggest concerns that any country should consider when evaluating internet voting? There are a number of them. For example, votes may be corrupted in transit by some hacker. Another concern: who got to install the vote counting software, or even the operating system on the server? Just like in the DRE machines, whoever gets to install the software decides who wins the election. Are the election officials verifying all this software stack? Even if no insider is modifying any software, we still have the concern of being hacked by an external attacker. Let's remember that in this case, the election software is open to the public internet. There have been reported cases of internet voting elections that had been hacked before. On the other end, we also have to worry about the vulnerabilities on the client side. The user interface could say anything, but instead doing another thing. There might be a malicious software running in background. There are so many questions that we have to ask ourselves and evaluate when deciding which technology to go for. There are so many unsolved problems here. One of the improvements that is currently taking place in UK, and researchers are hoping that this will be the standard for elections in the future, consists on implementing a system where each ballot form have a candidate list in a random order, different one another, and with an encrypted barcode that is later scanned into the system by election officials. The candidate list is known only by the voter and is ripped out and shredded after the vote has been cast. This right-hand side will be the receipt for the voter and can be used to check online later that the vote has been included in the tallying process. So, as we can see, electronic voting systems introduce so many new challenges that it's understandable why not everyone has upgraded yet to this kind of technologies. Recent studies on election security say that conducting elections with paper-based voting systems is one of the most important steps that can be taken to improve election security. So, any country evaluating using these technologies must carefully consider all these challenges and allow sufficient time for research, consultation, and testing before making a decision. Thank you.